Hi, Dr. Tammy here. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit about addictions, and we have New Year's resolutions coming up, so it's a big time for people to start thinking about that the first of the year. And what are you going to do with your resolutions? Addictions are huge, and people start thinking about the things that they want to change about their life, which is a wonderful thing. So when you want to change addictions, it can be very hard. And I think the reason that people don't stick with New Year's resolutions is because they get frustrated or they sabotage themselves or they don't really have a clear, specific plan on how they're going to maintain and sustain their plan. And so I'm going to go through some very specific details, and I want you to take some notes and write them down, because I think these are things that you may have never tried before when you're trying to free yourself of addictions or even trying to make New Year's resolutions. So I think these would be really powerful for you. The first thing I want to do is just describe what an addiction is in a way that will be meaningful for you, so you can really kind of stop and honor what's happening when you're experiencing the addiction. So addictions are basically just an attempt to soothe anxiety. And when we're talking about stress, anxiety comes up. And anxiety is just an inner state of unrest that's asking you to soothe it. Anxiety is normal and it's okay. And it's a part of the stress response that I talked about, part of the cortisol response. And I was talking to my life coach the other day. Yes, I have a life coach. I think it's absolutely amazing to have a life coach. We're all growing, we're all changing. You know, I heard somebody the other day say that even Brad Pitt has a acting coach, and he's one of the most accomplished actors, but he's still growing and he's still developing his skill. And so I think it's amazing when you can continue to work with mentors and coaches to help you continue to develop. So I was talking with her and I told her that I was really anxious lately and I didn't really understand that. And she said, that's normal and that's a good thing. And I'm like, how's that a good thing? She said, that's a good thing because that means that you're changing, you're growing, you're getting uncomfortable with where you are in your life right now. And I thought, wow, that's interesting, because I am starting to get uncomfortable. I want to do more. I want to share more. I want to help people on a bigger level. And so what I'm doing in the day-to-day sometimes feels small and uncomfortable, and that's completely normal. She equated it like being in the birth canal. It's probably not very comfortable in the birth canal. I don't remember it. But, you know, you have to keep pushing through and you have to keep developing. And so even when you're out of the birth canal, you continue developing. So it's very important to just kind of honor where you are and that you're feeling anxious. I kind of got caught up in something I call the shoulds, and she really helped me through that process, because I kept thinking I should be happy where I am. I should be happy in the day-to-day and seeing patients, which I do. I love my patients, but I kept thinking I should be happy with the way my life is right now. And she said, no, you shouldn't, and so everything is shoulds with me. I should want this or I should want that, and it's all dictated by what I think I should want or what I think I should have. So anyway, that's just kind of my little introduction to say stop focusing on the shoulds. If you feel anxious, don't think I shouldn't feel anxious. Just honor it and say, why am I feeling anxious, and what growth is coming my way? So with New Year's resolutions coming up, that's a great time for growth. And a lot of people, when they make their New Year's resolutions, they often fail because they don't have a specific plan. So I'm going to give you some very specific details that will help you if you have an addiction, because a lot of times people want to free themselves from addictions with their New Year's resolutions. So I want to talk a little bit about what anxiety is. Anxiety is just that inner state of unrest that's asking you to soothe it. And addictions are attempts to self-soothe, and they work pretty well. So if you've ever been a smoker, if you've ever been a drinker, or you've ever been a sugar addict, you know very well that when you're feeling anxious and you engage in those things, you oftentimes feel better in the moment, but it's not a long-term release of the stress. So first, honoring what your stress is, honoring that you're growing, where you're at, and then really honor what that addiction is and accept it, and then say, you know what, I don't need that anymore because I'm growing and I'm changing. So you can be addicted to a lot of things. You can be addicted to cigarettes, food, sugar, sex, shopping, drugs, and you can even be addicted to another person. I think that's shows up in unhealthy relationships. They call it codependency, or Maybe when you're just looking for a specific thing in a relationship like sex or sex addiction, or when you're addicted to a person that's unhealthy, they make you feel better in the moment and they can help you self-soothe. But as soon as they leave, you're anxious again. So that's addicted to a person. And it's really better to have preferences. I prefer to have that person around, but I don't need them around to soothe my inner state of feeling. So some very specific things that you can do to help break addiction and anxiety is, get healthy, eat right, of course, exercise. I'm going to be talking much more about that coming up. There are some very specific supplements that you can take, and I think it's very interesting that the man who invented AA, which, alcohol is another addiction, but anyway, he really recognized the role of B vitamins in addictive chemistry in the brain, and dopamine is the main hormone and neurochemical in the brain that's responsible for addictions. And when you have a lot of dopamine, you feel really, really good. I think that's why methamphetamine addicts take meth, because the first time you take meth, it stimulates a huge amount of dopamine in the brain. But the problem is they keep needing more and more of that chemical to keep that dopamine level where it's at. And so, they'll do really unhealthy behaviors to maintain their addiction. So don't get started on meth, absolutely. But dopamine is that main hormone in the brain. And, when those meth addicts do that, it's like the best chocolate chip cookies ever. It's like, the warmest, fuzziest Christmas snuggle, best sex ever. It's like just amazing. And all that dopamine just floods the brain. So it's no wonder that those people stay in that addiction. They say that some of those addictions with drugs and things like that actually own you, and that you don't own the addiction because it starts to control you. And those chemicals in the brain do. And I tell my weight loss patients all the time that your hormones speak louder than your cognitive ability to make decisions for yourself. So you've got to balance out that dopamine, and niacin is a B vitamin that does that very well. So great supplement. Magnesium also calms the nerves. A nice magnesium bath is great with Epsom salts. But taking magnesium can calm your blood pressure, relax your smooth muscles and your skeletal muscles. So if you're tense in the face, all sorts of things. So magnesium is great. Fish oil is another thing that I recommend. Fish oil is an anti-inflammatory, but it also calms and improves brain-nerve connectivity. So, people with attention deficit disorder who get really anxious all the time may just need more fish oil to complete those myelin sheaths to really help with that connectivity. N-acetylcysteine is an amino acid that's very interesting, calms neurotransmitters and brain chemicals. It's great for cigarette addiction as well, because a lot of times when people try to stop smoking, they'll get a lot of extra secretions in the lung, and it calms those extra secretions, so that's very cool too. Methylfolate clears toxins from the body and unhealthy hormones, and I talk a lot about the different kinds of estrogens and the unhealthy estrogens. So it clears the unhealthy estrogens that can cause mood imbalances. A lot of times women with PMS will have high levels of unhealthy estrogen, so it helps clear that out. But folate, not folic acid, and I'll do a whole talk on just folic acid and the DNA of something called MTHFR, but folate specifically is one of the main things that helps with depression. And a lot of times people who are depressed will seek out addictions because it's self-soothing their depression. And so methylfolate is a wonderful thing for chronic depression and anxiety. Methyl B12, you hear about B12 all the time. Methyl B12 is already metabolized B12. It's kind of like, I call it ABC gum or even chewed gum. Methyl B12 is already metabolized B12, so it gets right into the DNA and helps with energy levels. So a lot of times when people are tired, they'll seek out addictive behaviors because it peps them up, whether it's a stimulant, whether it's caffeine, whether it's sugar. Cigarettes can stimulate people. So, you get tired and you think, oh, I'll just go smoke a cigarette, or oh, I'm tired, I'll just eat some sugar. And that might help you for a little bit, but it's not sustainable, and it's not a healthy way to maintain your balance. So B12 is amazing and helps with energy levels. So a couple supplements that you'll want to get and have in your little cabinet to take this daily. And a lot of times we have something that we call Reclaim Calm that's got magnesium and niacin and methylfolate in it, and so it's a combination product. So it's nice when you can get those too. And all of those supplements need to be quality supplements. Just go into the dollar store or whatever and getting supplements is probably not a great idea. You want to get good quality stuff to really notice a difference. So you want to focus on getting healthy, and I mentioned exercise, and getting balanced and eating right. You may want to get some blood tests for mineral and vitamin and nutritional levels, your hormone levels, because hormones can be out of whack and cause you to be tired and gain weight and be sluggish. Things like insulin, thyroid, your estrogens, progesterones, all of those. And so if your hormones are imbalanced, you're more likely to have addictions just because you're trying to self-soothe the internal imbalance. And food sensitivities. I have so many patients that, and I do a whole talk on food sensitivities, but food sensitivities are a blood test of, we have a panel that's 96 foods or almost 200 foods that can stimulate the immune system in an inflammatory response. And that stimulation of the immune system can be very agitating to the balance of the system. And so literally with me, I'm sensitive to gluten and dairy. And when I eat gluten, within 15 minutes, my heart rate goes up 15 beats. I get really anxious. And, that would be the time that whatever addictions that I may have, I would be thinking, oh, well, maybe I just need to go have some sugar or something or calm that. So very interesting to get those food sensitivities and be aware of those foods that trigger that. I have a lot of patients with their kids have autism or attention deficit disorder, and we do food sensitivities so we can identify those trigger foods that are going to upset their moods and make them anxious. And so calming anxiety is very important for stress reduction, and with addictions, that's your attempt to self-soothe. So to not need that self-soothing and just to be balanced, food sensitivities can be wonderful for that. Start an exercise routine. Walking is great to clear the mind. I love dancing. I do the We Just Dance. It's great. So exercise is wonderful. Strength training is great to build muscle, but some of those aerobic activities are really good to calm the mind. And there's been research that just 5 minutes a day of aerobic activity, like taking a walk, can dramatically reduce your stress. So if you just have 5 minutes, take a walk. I mean, that's a great thing that you can do. So focus on eating healthy. It's great if you know your food sensitivities. I recommend just avoiding gluten and dairy if you don't know your food sensitivities right now. That can be really powerful because most people are sensitive to gluten and dairy. And dairy has a lot of excess estrogens in it, which can cause imbalance in the system too. So another reason. Gluten, a lot of times there's pesticides on the wheat, and so those things can throw you out of balance. So getting healthy, eating healthy is very important. So I want to talk a little bit about when you feel the addictive thought creep in. You're taking your supplements, you're eating healthy, you've done blood tests, you're balanced. Addictions are, the anxiety that comes in. It's interesting because if you can be present in the moment, you don't have to chase every thought like a dog chases a smell. You can cognitively say, I don't have to think about that thought right now, and focus on something positive or something good, which can be really helpful. So another thing that you can do when you feel anxious is what I call the inquiry process. Byron Katie has 4 questions that she has people ask themselves. And the first thing that you ask yourself is this true? Can I absolutely know this is true? So if you're feeling anxious and you're feeling like running to an addiction, stop and ask yourself, maybe somebody's talking about you at work or something, and is that absolutely true? Do you know it's true? Do you know they said that? Do you know how they're really feeling? And so inquiry can be really important. Make a new story around your anxious thought. And this is very interesting because as a creative person, as a creative writer and an artist, I am very likely to embellish and to make the story more elaborate than it really is. That's just my gift, but it can be a curse too. So if you're a very creative thinker, the stories that you create in your brain can be blown out of proportion sometimes. So just kind of ask yourself, am I blowing this out of proportion? Am I really, is this just a great creative story that I've kind of made around this situation? And be ready to let it go, and say, yeah, I think I'm exaggerating a little bit. Sometimes my husband will say to me, really? Or I'll say to my son, when he's having a tantrum or something, I'm like, really? Are you kidding me? You're having a fit over that? So maybe you can just ask yourself sometimes, really? Are you kidding me? And choose a more boring story. if someone's like talking bad about you, just, recreate in your mind that maybe they're just not that important, and so even if they're talking bad about you, it makes the story just a little bit less boring. And if you're a person who's addicted to negative behavior, every once in a while I have to put myself on a 30-day negative fast, because sometimes I'll get talking negative. Everything's bad, and oh my gosh, my life's a mess, and so I put myself on these little fasts. And so if you are addicted to talking negative, or you call up your friend, or you're Facebooking, you're saying, oh my gosh, this is terrible, this just happened to me, choose a more boring story, because people aren't going to want to listen to that, and you're not going to want to retell that story. So just play it down a little bit. And it's usually the story that tortures you, and Byron Katie talks about that a lot too, those obsessive thoughts. It's only the story that you create in your mind that's actually torturing you. So find a way to downplay that story and make it less exciting than it might be in the moment. And hey, it's great when we all have a great story and we can get people to champion our cause. That feels good. But, it's just kind of, that's an addiction too. So it's just a little short-term self-soothing behavior, and it's really not healthy in the long run. Addictions are just an attempt to short circuit your brain, and so that obsessive thinking that you kind of get in that loop, you don't want to do that. So how do you create a new story? Well, the good news is that you can recreate a new story, and the more terrified and crippled you are by your old story just means that you're a delicious creator of stories. So the more anxious you are, that's really cool, because that means that you're really, really creative. So just focus on a new story that will serve you instead of one that won't serve you. So, imagine that people are actually talking good about you, even if you kind of suspect that maybe they're not. Or tell yourself a story that, that you're amazing, and, the reason they're talking about you is because you're amazing. My friend was telling me the other day, I told her that I felt like, someone was not happy with me, and she said, you're an easy target because people look up to you, and because you have accomplished many great things. And so I thought, wow, okay, that's my new story. That's probably a good thing when people talk about you. Marilyn Monroe actually said she knew that she'd made the big time when people were talking bad about her. So, focus on that new story. Another thing is just breathe. That sounds so simple. My husband teaches stress. He's a world-renowned speaker, and the biggest thing he says is be in the moment and just breathe. So if you can just count to 10, slow deep breaths in and out, that will really help you when you're thinking about that addiction. Just breathe and calm down, and be still. I talk about that a lot. That's it says in the Bible, just be still. So be still and breathe. That's very helpful. Meditation. I don't want to scare people with meditation. There's lots of ways you can meditate. Painting is meditation for me. Walking is meditation. Singing can be meditation. Taking a shower can be meditation. Anything that brings you present in the moment. Sometimes I like to just, to sit and meditate is really hard for me because I'm very active, and my brain is always going. Sometimes meditation can be just, I'm just going to sit down and say a prayer of gratefulness. I'm just going to say, thank you, God, for my life. Thank you for my husband. Thank you for my children. Thank you for my warm home and my fuzzy sweaters. And thank you, thank you, thank you. So that's a great meditation. And focusing on the positive can be so amazing, and really help you reduce stress as well. So, become aware of your surroundings. Become aware of your body. Sometimes your self-soothing is because you have suppressed your feelings. And as women, we do this a lot. Especially when I was in medical school and residency, I was busy, in the ICU with people who were critical and dying. And sometimes I didn't even realize that I had to go to the bathroom, or that I was hungry, because I just didn't allow myself to think about anything else other than what I was doing in the moment. I hear so many people say, well, at work when they're busy all day, they don't even take bathroom breaks. They've just suppressed that part of their body. So learn to listen to your body and say, do I need to go to the bathroom? Am I hungry? Am I cold? Am I tense? What's really going on with me? So if you're hungry, as simple as it sounds, just eat something. If you're cold, turn up the heat. If you're hot, turn down the AC. If you're tense, take a walk, scream in a pillow. Just do something to break that circuit of your anxiety. I had a friend tell me one time to stand on my head, and now that I've been doing yoga, I can actually stand on my head, which is great. But if you're not really able to get on your head, don't do that. But there's lots of things you can do. There's some tapping procedures that they teach on the internet and all sorts of different things that you can do just to break that physical cycle sometimes. But just honor, if your body needs something. Do you have physical pain? Do you have gas, headache, stiffness? There's so many supplements that I use magnesium for headaches. I use fish oil for stiffness, pancreatic enzymes and probiotics for digestive issues and gas. So, make sure you're taking care of yourself. And sometimes if in the moment, if you're having a little trouble with a physical symptom, sometimes just taking a hot shower can help relax you. So when you've addressed all your physical needs, then you have to kind of come to how are you feeling? Okay, so now we're at the emotion stage. So own the feeling. And I like to get out a piece of paper and write down, I am feeling, maybe that's blank, sad, anxious, hurt, scared, and then because, fill in the blank. I'm feeling sad because my dog has the flu. Really just honor, oh my gosh, what's going on with me? So it's okay if you don't know right away, but ask yourself, what am I afraid will happen to me? And where's this really coming from? Sometimes you have to go to old hurts. It's so interesting, not too long ago, my husband had woke up early one morning and he wasn't in the house. And I looked all around for him. There was no note. That was really strange. She'd never done that before. And I got more anxious and more anxious as the time went on. And finally he came home and he had gone to get donuts for breakfast, which we don't usually eat donuts. So I know I try to be health conscious. But anyway, he'd gone to the donut store. And he's like, honey, I just went to get donuts. And I was bawling. He's like, what's wrong? And I'm thinking, I don't know. I sat with the feeling for a little while and I realized that when my dad died when I was 19, I wasn't there and I didn't get to say goodbye to him. And I felt abandoned and I felt angry and, it wasn't his fault he died, but I had all these pent up emotions. And so when my husband was gone, I felt abandoned. But it took me back in my brainstem to that time when I was 19 when my dad died. And that's what it was really about. It wasn't about him going to the store. He was doing a sweet thing. And, oh my gosh, he was only gone 10, 15 minutes. But it was really about an old hurt. So just honor that old hurt. Embrace your old story. And again, if you're a creative person, you're going to play up the stories in your brain and those things that get stored in your brainstem that continue to create anxiety. If you haven't owned them and honored them, they're just going to keep coming back to literally haunt you until you just kind of accept them and move forward. So one thing that I like to do is think of one wonderful thing in your life. It's a moment that can give you pleasure. And so it can be a moment when you experience something great, like you graduated from college, or maybe when you met your lover, or when your first child was born. Focus on that story. And so anytime you're feeling anxious or you're feeling like there's a story going on that's making you anxious, focus on that story. Just move your brain chemistry a little bit, and that can be so helpful. And at first it can feel kind of contradictory because your brain's like wanting to focus on the story that you're in. But if you create that habit or you practice that, just like anything, practicing the piano, doing anything can develop a skill. And so you can actually retrain your brain to think in a positive way. If you still are feeling anxious, like the addiction has power over you, then just go through the steps again. And again, I recommend reading Byron Katie's book, The Work. I love everything by Marianne Williamson. I've just been reading a book called Everyday Grace that's absolutely wonderful, and she talks about dealing with the daily emotions that come up. So, even if you can just take a break and go read something that really grows your mind, expands your mind, that can really get you thinking, can be wonderful too. Focus on what you want. Don't give in to fear. If your life or your health is not what you want to be, focus on what you want. Don't focus on the negative or I'm not healthy or I have this addiction. Think about what your life will look like when you're free of the addiction. If you're a drinker, think what will my life be like when people don't come to me the next day and say, oh my gosh, you were a total jerk last night? Think about how good it's going to feel when they say, you know what, I really enjoyed spending the evening with you last night, and you seemed really present and, aware, and that felt really good. Or if you have a food addiction, don't think, be stressed like, I have this food addiction. Think about how good it's going to feel when you lose weight and you can go shopping for new clothes. So focus on what you want, and don't give in to that fear. Healing, in every aspect is a journey, and so focus on the journey. Don't focus on right now. And if you mess up, if you fall back into your addiction, don't just let it sabotage you. Don't let it, oh my gosh, I thought I'd stop drinking and I had a drink. I guess I'll just keep drinking because I can't quit. You know, that's what keeps you where you are. Or when you have a resolution, I screwed up, I broke my diet, I did something wrong. I might as well just eat whatever I want. And then that's what keeps creating that. So make sure you stay focused on what you want. Thinking about what you're afraid of too. I heard somebody say one time, when you're little and you're scared and you think there's a monster in the closet, the best thing that you can do is get up and turn on the light and look and see that there's not a monster in the closet. So that can be really powerful. If you think your boss is angry at you, go ask your boss, are you mad at me? What can I do to improve my performance? Is my job in jeopardy? Just go there. Worst case scenario, they can say, yeah, you're in trouble, and then you can fix it. So action is the antidote to fear. So when you're feeling stressed or fearful, that's a great step too. So, and I always do an exercise with my patients about writing down what your fears are, because sometimes people have never even acknowledged that they have fears. And fears can create a lot of anxiety. So when I did this exercise, I started making my list, and I thought, I'm not really scared of much. But by the time I was done, I had 3 pages of a list of fears. And it's great if you do a little ceremony like burn it, or don't burn your house down or anything. Do it in a safe place, of course. But, to really acknowledge those fears and to release them can be really, really important too. Focus on the positive. That kind of goes without saying, but, the glass half full. Focus on what you actually want. I call this reframing. And so I have these little exercises I do where, like, if someone's upset with their spouse, or, I had a lady one time said, I can't stand my husband, he's absolutely horrible. And so I worked with her and I said, think of 3 things you like about him. And so he was a great father, he was funny, and a good provider. And so I said, whenever you get stressed, think about those 3 things. And she came back a couple weeks later and she's like, that was amazing. It's really interesting because his behavior changed. And it's like interesting because his behavior didn't change at all. Hers did. And she was focusing on the positive in her relationship with him. So the only thing you can change is yourself. So if you focus on that, it seems like everyone else around you changes, but they don't really. So get a wider perspective of the human experience. I think that is so important to remember, that really just kind of ask yourself, is this true? Just a little bit of inquiry. And 99% of the things we worry about happening never happen. And 99% of the things that happen that are bad are things we never even thought of. So, we blow things out of proportion a lot. Fear and anxiety is also usually based on false interpretation or miscommunication. So get your communication straight, do your inquiry. And oftentimes we have this illusion of safety, and so we think, oh, it's safe if I don't create any conflict. And it's not about creating conflict, it's just about interpersonal relationships and opening the closet door and seeing if there's a monster there. It's so, so important. Curiosity. Be curious about things. You can turn your anxiety around into, I wonder if, or I wonder what, if this happened. And so you go from a fearful place to a curious place. So that can be great too. And trust is also an antidote to fear. It's so hard for us to trust because, most of us have been hurt in relationships. We've been hurt in business. We've been hurt so many places. But learning to trust starts with yourself. Learn to trust yourself, and that's a hard thing to do because you can't trust anyone else until you trust yourself. So learn to trust that you're going to make good decisions, that you're in a good place. Just trust that God is always working things out for you. And that's so true. We look back at our lives, we go through a stressful situation, feels crazy, but we look back on our lives and it's like, oh, God had me the whole time. And so sometimes we don't put our faith in God, and we just try to do it all ourselves. I was talking to my friend whose husband's very sick in the hospital right now, and I said, these trials, these tribulations, as you're going through them, they feel horrible. But when you look on this a year from now, you'll see where you grew and that things happen for you and not to you. So it's amazing when you have that God perspective and you can look back, hindsight 2020. But try to focus on the now, thinking everything's working out for me, that this is all is as it should be. And the last thing is just focus on love. We can choose love or we can choose fear in any moment. There's a hormone in the brain called oxytocin that's the love, cuddle, snuggle hormone. And a lot of times children with autism are deficient in oxytocin, and so they don't have those social, emotional connections. And that can be a real struggle. Or if you have addictions, sometimes you self-soothe through things to try to upregulate your oxytocin. So there are things that you can do to healthy ways to regulate your oxytocin. A hug for 20 seconds, looking into someone's eyes, having a pet, petting a pet, snuggling with somebody. Getting your hormones balanced is very important because all your hormones interact with each other. So all these things can help upregulate your oxytocin levels, and exercise can upregulate your oxytocin too. So, find a hobby, find something that's fun, that can feel really good, but find healthy things, not addictive behaviors. Or if you're going to get addicted to something, get addicted to something that's healthy for you, like exercise, or get addicted to painting or a hobby or something like that. So really focus on maybe not so much giving up your addictions, but trading your addictions maybe for more healthy things. So hope this was helpful. As you're making your New Year's resolutions, it's very important that you write your goals down. Be very clear what they are and what you want. Keep your focus and be still, and give it to God and just be present in the moment. And I think that you'll find that addictions are not that hard to break. So anyway, thank you so much for spending this time with me. Hopefully this was helpful. I'm going to continue this series on stress and give you more tips and hopefully some things that will be really helpful in your life. So thanks for being with me.